Welcome everyone to the Red Zone. So as Terry mentioned, I will be going over the eConsent 2.0, going over the framework. Terry did a presentation on this when it first came out. So we'll be diving in on a few recommendations we have when it comes to the instruments, the fields you should have in there, as well as the eConsent setup. And then we'll be closing it off with the file repository as well as creating a PDF snapshot. So we as a RedCap team whole have created a PDF document. It's going to pretty much kind of cover all the bases we're going to go over today. So Michael, if you'd be kind enough to please attach that into the chat. This document we've worked as a team. Again, for those that would prefer to have a working document on how to build this, that is the sole purpose of this. So we'll get started. So first thing when it comes to the eConsent, you'll want to make sure it has to be enabled as a survey in order to use this feature. So just a quickly reminder, you'll go to project setup, you'll go to enable your survey. This will then give you the option in your designer for the eConsent. Once you've enabled this, couple of recommendations we have setting up the eConsent. We have an instrument titled informed consent. In this, we have a field with an entry date. We have used a few action tags, but we're hiding the survey. We're using a hide button, read only, and add today. Just a reminder on how to enable those, you'll just simply go to action tag, and then you would search those, add them to add them. The reason we have that enabled, when we go to our file repository at the very end, we're going to want to see that entry date when the participant came into this survey, when they filled it out. We have here a descriptive text where we just have the title of what the study. This is all fictional study that we've just created. We also have a descriptive text where we're giving the participants a synopsis of what the study entails. If you want to have a contact, and also the capability of having an image that is IRB approved or appropriate with your study. By simply doing that, that gives the participant also a visual of what the study is about. By simply just inserting an image here, you would then center it by the width and height. This here is a descriptive text, which is going to be very important when we get to the eConsent framework. The variable name will be consent underscore text. The reason we have this, you'll see it further down in the presentation. This is where we're going to put that informed consent. So that way it's pretty much in that once we see it in the survey. That's very important. So again, a descriptive text, and you can title it whatever you'd like, ICF, informed. But this, just a reminder, you'll want to ensure you remember that. When this new eConsent came out, there was a new action tag titled consent inversion. With this action tag, the sole purpose of it is when you have a participant consent, the version will show up on the record in the PDF snapshot. So kind of quickly go over the documentation on that as well. It gives you also more information, so highly recommend to review this, but this tag essentially is going to give you that value of what version, if you're 2.0, 3.0, 14.0. So that way, just for an audit trail, you can have that consent version, which will show in your PDF snapshot, give you that information. So we just have some context when we do see a number, as you'll see, this is version 2.0. So that way, when we see our PDF snapshot, we don't just see a 2.0. We'll be able to now see ICF, informed consent version, and then whatever version it is. We have hidden so that way the participant is not able to view it. We have a stop action. Do you agree to participate in the study? And we simply have enabled it from here that we want this option no to end this survey if the participant does not want to participate in the study. In order to have this feature enabled, you'll go to that survey setting on the instrument that we have enabled in. We're going to go ahead and scroll all the way down till we see that hand. When we see this option here, you have two options. Do you want to save any of the responses regardless of stop action being triggered, which is default, or do you do not save the survey response when a trigger has been occurred? So you have the option to select which one you would like. In this case, we're going with the default. Then you'll be prompted with setting up a message that you'd like. So if this trigger does occur, so at this moment we have thank you for your interest in the study. Unfortunately, you did not consent to enroll in the study. If you have any questions, contact. You would then place that email of whatever contact you have. Once you've enabled that, that's how we'll be able to have, we look here in our icons, we have that we've enabled the stop action. We're using the eConsent, which is this icon here, and we have it enabled as a survey. Once you've enabled that stop action for these responses, this is when you'll have it. So we have that stop action here. This is something that Manny has demonstrated in the past when it comes to embedding fields. This has been pulled from one of Tanya's project. We think it's a very clean, aesthetically pleasing way to set up your first, last name, email address, any other information. But if you'll notice, the signature field is not embedded. And the reason being, if you embed the signature into this section here, it'll show up on the survey, but when you look at your file repository for that documentation, that signature will not appear. So we strongly recommend not to embed the signature with this information because it will not show up in your file repository when you want to pull up that record of that. So we have just here this information. By signing this consent form, you'll right here then want to join the study. We have just first name, last name, email address, telephone, date of birth. As you can see here, we're also using our branching logic. If they do select one to consent, this is when all of this information be in there. Scrolling down, we'll see that all of that information. In this section here, this is where we'll see that the signatures, you can see it's not embedded by the new icons. So we just have the signature. This is when per your study, you can customize it. You can add a second signature for study staff, study signature. You would then just have a title there for that information. We also have a eConsent signature date where we're using a couple of action tags here. So that we can capture when we sign this, you'll be able to see it here in a few minutes. When we sign this information, we want to know what date and what time was this signed out. Going to our designer here. Then we have the eligibility. So if a participant does want to enroll in the study, then they'll move on to the next section. We have a header, eligibility questions, that determines if they would like to enroll in the study. We have these embedded, and we're using the same thing, the stop action. So we're going through our inclusions, exclusions, as far as what options, if they do select them, it's going to immediately stop this survey and give them another response. And I'll show them a little bit that they did not meet the eligibility criteria. So we see our questions here that yes, do you have this? Do you not have this? We can see what's going to enable this. Now we did have a third instrument called stop, that if any of these options are then triggered, they'll be prompted with this message. And we're using, again, our branching logic in order to enable this, that if any of these are selected, this is when they should receive this. Thank you for interest in the study. Unfortunately, you do not meet the inclusion criteria. If you have any questions, contact, and you would place then your study contact. Now I'd like to go over the survey distribution tool, just to give you kind of the visual of what that looks like coming together. So we'll open up our survey. As we can see, we have our study title, a synopsis of what the study is looking for, what they're looking at, if they do have any contact information. And if you recall, we mentioned a consent underscore text. This is where we placed our informed consent with the information of the study, asking them if they're interested. And then this is the question, do you agree to participate in the study? If they select no, then they'll come to this option that they're going to stop the survey. But we'll go ahead and select yes. We're then greeted with our embedded fields, our first name, last name, telephone. Fill those out. Then we have our signature field that is not embedded. Sign it. We're then prompted here with our date and the time that this was signed at. And click next. This is then our official eConsent that we are certifying that all the information documented above is correct, that we understand by clicking submit. We'll electronically sign the form and will be essentially the same as physically signing the form. This is very important to officially make it that eConsent. So we're going to sign that. Then we're prompted with our eligibility questions. If you do recall, this does have a hard stop. So this you have to have yes in order to continue. Same thing would be prompted with you've triggered something to end this survey. So we'll go in and Click yes, we are, so we can kind of meet that eligibility. We'll submit it, and we've completed the survey. The other thing I'd like to go over now is the eConsent. Now that we've set up the instruments, the fields, how do we get the consent form set up? How does everything kind of now come together? So you'll go into this. Once you've built your instruments, your fields, you'll be prompted in this main hub. So this is your eConsent framework in your PDF snapshot. They probably about maybe a month or 2 months, Vanderbilt, I believe, has updated this eConsent framework and snapshot video. It's a lot better than the first one that did come out. I feel like it does give you good information of how to set this up, how does the PDF snapshot work, how to set it up. It won't really go dive into the design or the instruments, but the video is very informative. It's approximately about 4 minutes and 19 seconds. So I'd highly encourage you to please view it if you are interested. It does give you that information. So when we are in this section, we'll pretend this hasn't been created. When you click on this here, you're going to be prompted with selecting, again, it has to be a survey in order to work with eConsent, but you'll select what survey, what instrument do you want to enable this eConsent. As you can see, we did have our eConsent set up on the eConsent instrument, hence why it's not able to be selected. We've already set it up. So we'll get and work into here since you would see the same thing. But a few things that you'll have to select, the first name and last name. Just one thing to note though, it doesn't ask for a first name wherever it may be. There has to be a field in your instruments that calls for first name and last name. If you're using a single field to capture the whole name, you may select it for either first or last name while leaving the other unselected. So that's something important for you to understand. Another thing, if you want to enable this, you're allowing your participants to edit their first name or last name. Additional settings, you can also select date of birth. Very similar to the first and last name, you have to have a field that has that information so it can pull it. You can set up a custom tag for PDF footer. So if you're working on a pediatric study, this would be really good to kind of notate that this is a pediatric study. So you're doing any quality assurance, you can verify that information, as well as a PDF header. And you can use the project ID followed by their last name. This option here for the signature, we have not selected it. The reason being is if you choose to enable this, you're allowing your participants, if they do click the back button at all, it will erase the values of these signature fields, thus forcing them to sign the fields again before completing the survey. If you don't want this behavior, do not select the signature fields. You can have up to 5 signature fields. As we mentioned, if you're using a participant and then a study staff or quality control, wherever you'd like, you could use that, but if any point your participant goes back to the survey, it erases and they'll have to go again. As far as location to save your consent forms, it by default will save it to the file repository and also store any translated versions of PDF if you're using the MLM. This option here has not been selected since we do not have a field that's for a file upload. If you did have a field that you entered in that's for a file upload, this would then be enabled, triggering to which field do you want to have that. But in this case, we're not going to do that. You have your snapshot file name. This is where you can customize it if you'd like to change it to your last name, first name, date of birth. By default, it's going to do it by your PID, followed by the instrument label and the record name. You could use in notes. So you may add any custom notes here for reference if you'd like. You can place that there. Once you've gone through all of your settings, you would then click Save. This would then pop up. Now that we've set this up, we need to add the consent form. To add a consent form, you would simply click the plus arrow, Add Consent. You would then enter the consent form version. It is required though for each version to consist with a number. You cannot use the letter V, so you can't use version 1_2 or whatever it may be. It has to be by numerical numbers. Again, it doesn't have to necessarily be the informed consent. It could be the IRB one, whatever you like, but it has to have a number in order to maintain that audit trail. If you recall, we did have a descriptive text field that was consent_text. This is where you select where do you want this consent form that you're going to upload to be displayed. And it just gives you a reminder, choose the descriptive field on the server that will serve as a location for the consent form. In this case, we've selected consent underscore text. If you're using any DAGs, if you're using any MLM, if this was a Spanish consent, English consent, French, whatever language may be, this is where you would select that. The same thing for DAG. If this was for Tucson, Marana, Phoenix, you would then select that appropriate location. One thing that Carol has noted, the IRB has recommended to always use the inline PDF when you're uploading them. So you'll use the consent form inline PDF. You would then upload your consent form in there. You would then add a new consent form. Something very important though to know is after you click add a new consent form, it goes live immediately. So one recommendation we would have, especially if you're working this, just to prevent any participants enrolling in the inappropriate consent form, to kind of protect you for quality assurance. Since this is a survey, you can always just turn it off, making sure obviously you're communicating with your staff, your participants to let them know that they're not going to be able to enroll. You would then turn it off, save your changes, and that would prevent any participants from enrolling into the incorrect consent form. As a reminder, once you've added that consent form and you click add new consent form, it's going to go live. You're going to have it prompted and the older one will then be deactivated, followed by the new one. So just making sure you're kind of just aware of that important notice. The video does also notate this information. So we've now attached our PDF. You would add the new. And at this point, your consent framework here has been set up. This little option here gives you your audit trail of any prior versions you've had. So as we can see, Tanya uploaded a consent form on February 13th. I on April 25th. So it gives you that information. It also gives you the number of records that were consented in that. If you use any data access groups, it would populate here, Tucson, Phoenix, etc. If this was a Spanish, English, French, it would also give you that information. It'll give you also the consent. You can also deactivate anyone. So let's say if I uploaded the incorrect one, I could set it as inactive and I can re-upload the correct consent form. Last section I would like to show you is the PDF snapshots of records. So by default, once you've enabled this here governed by eConsent is going to be automatically created. This is just setting up that information that you recall in the first window to save it. So when a participant does enroll, it's going to throw that information to the file repository. So that's something that's good that you don't have to worry to create a snapshot. But let's say for your study and your monitor wants you to also capture the eligibility. You can do that by simply clicking add a new trigger. I'll kind of just show you this because it's going to be the same. You would then give it a title. So for this instance, we're doing eligibility and we're triggering it every time the form is completed eligibility. We're going to want this captured. Something important to note though, when you are using this, by default, all instruments are going to be selected. So if you have 15, 20 instruments, that can be kind of very annoying when you're looking at your file repository and you're seeing, why is this PDF snapshot so long? It's due to the fact that all of the instruments were selected to be captured in the snapshot. So you just want to make sure that you select and deselect the appropriate and you update it. That way it reflects exactly here. You have an option to save it as a compact PDF or to store the version of the PDF if you're using the multi-language. We're just going to save it to include only fields with saved data in that snapshot. We're saving it to the file repository. We are not going to be uploading any fields in there while this is not being enabled. And again, same thing to the eConsent were populated with the file name. You would then click save, and that is how you'll be prompted with this snapshot. Now, how do you see these consent forms and how can you view everything? That'll be located in the file repository. If you click here, you're going to see your PDF snapshot archive. Minimize this, we can kind of follow along. But we can see this, again, I would just say it's the eConsent icon, but we could see the eConsent icon. We can see the record that it is in informed consent. We then have the date, the time, our identifiers, the name and date of birth. It is capturing the IP address. And as you remember that action tag consent version, that is how it's determining this is version 2.0. And more importantly, we're getting the eConsent to make it an authentic eConsent. These others that don't have that information, that's going to be those PDF snapshots that we created, the additional for the eligibility. We're capturing just that eligibility where we can see they answered yes, they are 25, no to the other questions. Looking at this consent form here. We're getting the entry date that was hidden, so we can have that information. When was this there? And it's also going to give you the top of the header, the date as well. If you recall, we are pulling the time. We're having the consent form attached to this, which is very important. We're getting their first name and their signature, which is displayed there. And again, at the bottom, we can see that date and time with that information. And with that, that pretty much completes a quick demonstration of the eConsent fields that we would encourage to have in your project, the eConsent framework, and the PDF snapshot. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Okay. First of all, this is great. Thank you. I appreciate it, George. Um, so my first question is, when you created the e-consent, when you were walking through your data entry and all that, and you viewed it the first time, uh, I should have asked you then, but it looked like all I was seeing was the first page. It didn't show the consent that this person was checking that box to say that uh, so when you did it the first time, all of this didn't show up. So I mean, yes, I see this is the consent, but when the participant is asked to check a box saying that they agree, this is the, how do I say this? Is this different than what you did originally? Uh, This is not the survey view, right? Is this the,
It is, yeah, it's
or it
going
is? Okay.
to the
Okay.
survey distribution to kind of see what the participant would see. And then they're prompted with the question, do they want to participate in the study? Following that, then it would get this information to capture their first, last name, etc.
Where's the e-consent part?
So this right here.
No. Where is the,
Oh, you're talking about that. Okay. Let me quickly fill this out. We'll go through the eligibility.
this? Now, okay, so you just had to scroll down. So now scroll down, so I want to see the signature. Okay. All right. That's fine. Um, uh, my second question is, you can get rid of that. Thank you. I just needed to feel comfortable about that. Second question is, can you look at the record status dashboard and just open up what we're seeing? Open up the informed consent. The first one's fine. Okay, so there at the top is captured the consent form version, right? And so you aren't changing it like when we were doing it before, we would be having to, how do I say this? So it's important to see on this electronic form, this data entry form, what version somebody signed. Yes, it's important in the file repository, but it's also important to see it in the data entry screen here. And so if you are signing version 3.0, then it's going to show up there at the top, correct?
Yeah, with the action tag consent version is we'll give you that information, which is super important.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, because this eliminates all the crap that we were doing with when you select what version up at the top, and then you'd have multiple consents showing up on and hiding versus, all these consents based on what people selected at the top. This is so clean. This is so much nicer.
Yeah,
But then
they'll
my
maintain,
last, what, go ahead.
they'll maintain, which is nice, like you were saying in the past. At least we'll maintain that audit trail of old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Finally, does this give you the opportunity for a second signature? Or do we still have to use the external module, which would allow a coordinator to sign do a second signature on that e-consent?
No, it should still allow you to set that up. Like we mentioned, when you're setting this up here, if you wanted to kind of capture any additional like forced signatures, you would select them here. But if you have a participant first name and then the signature, it would all show up in that snapshot. So you don't have to have a second or anything like that. You would then just title it staff first name, last name, and then signature.
And Terry, from what I understand, we have to do the multi-signature one because it's not being signed at once. For the Recover project,
Right.
yeah, they're signing it and submitting the survey, and then the coordinator has to sign later. So I think this would be more for people who are signing all at once before they submit it.
Yeah, that's just what I wanted to make clear, that it's
Mm.
not going to do that just because there's a new e-consent version. Ah, okay. Anybody else have questions? That's it for me.